All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, and welcome to our webinar. I started talking and realized that my microphone was muted, so hopefully now we are connected up and you can hear me just fine. We welcome you this afternoon to our webinar, The Secret to Success in LSVT Loud and LSVT Big. And the point and heart of the matter of this webinar is that it's more than just exercises. And so my name is Cynthia Fox, and I'm joined by Heather Cianci, and we will be your faculty for this afternoon's webinar. In short, I'm a speech-language pathologist. I've worked with LSVT Global for over 20 years and will be talking about the LSVT loud or voice treatment size. And Heather is a physical therapist with extensive experience in neuro conditions and Parkinson's disease in particular, and she'll be sharing information on the LSVT big or movement exercise portion. So we need to go through just a few logistics here before we get into the content for this afternoon. You will be able to ask questions at the end, and we'll walk through how that can be done. During any time in the webinar, you have a little tab on your menu that you can type in a question, or you could raise your hand at the very end and ask a question that way. You were emailed a handout of the slides. They're also in your dashboard as well that you can certainly download, save, or print those. And I'd just like to make a comment regarding, we have two videos in this presentation, and the audio video quality over the internet play on webinars is not always that good. We believe it will be good enough to make our point, but please recognize it's something out of our control in terms of internet connection speeds as well as the program that we're using. For speech, it's okay because you will still be able to hear. Video, it just may be slightly delayed. We're going to present our webinar and our core content, which really is about reviewing key elements of Parkinson's that can make taking louder speech and bigger movements that you achieve during therapy outside into the real world challenging, and how you can be sure if you're going through treatment to make sure you're setting yourself up for success. We'll follow that with question and answer, and at the very end, when you log off the webinar, a survey will launch. And we ask you if you have 5 minutes or less to complete it, please do. We absolutely pay attention to your feedback and make adjustments about our presentations accordingly. These are detailed biographies of who we are. I won't go through those in detail, but you can have them in your handout if you'd like to learn more. And I just acknowledge that both Heather and I are affiliated with the company LSVT Global, both in terms of financial relationship as well as a preference for LSVT Loud and LSVT Big as treatment approaches. So our goals this afternoon are to identify 3 key deficits again that can make this idea of calibration, which we will define for you, quite challenging. We'll define how education, our daily exercises, and higher exercises in treatment are used to help achieve calibration. And we'll describe how homework and carryover exercises facilitate the use of this improved voice and improved movement outside of the treatment room. So with that, we always like to say that calibration in terms of LSVT loud and LSVT big treatment is at the heart of the matter. And this goes to the title of our webinar, which is it's more than just exercises. So some of you listening may have already been through the treatment programs, LSVT loud or LSVT big. Some of you, this may be the first time you're hearing something about them, or perhaps you're in the process of going through treatment. And so we won't necessarily go through all the exercises in this webinar as we have in previous ones, but our goal today is talking about how we translate the exercises and things we do in the therapy room out into the real world, so it actually has an impact on your daily functional communication and your daily activities of living, mobility, walking, and doing all the things that you love to do. So we define calibration as it happens in LSVT treatments as the person with Parkinson's disease knows and accepts the amount of effort needed to consistently produce either a louder voice or bigger, more normal amplitude movements. So this relationship between how much effort you put out and what the loudness or movement output actually is well established. The impact of doing that is that the person with Parkinson's disease begins to use this louder, better voice habitually in their daily communication and can maintain that over time. Similarly, the person with Parkinson's uses the bigger movements habitually in his or her daily functional tasks and can maintain those bigger movements over time. So it may sound easy, but it can be a real challenge both for the person with Parkinson's disease as well as for therapists delivering the treatment to achieve these calibration goals. Another way to look at this, perhaps in a more visual perspective, for those of you who learn by seeing, not by the words, on the left-hand side, here we have an example of a 100-pound weight. And if we were to put it on a scale that gave us a reading of 79.4 pounds, we would say that scale is out of calibration. So the actual weight does not match the weight that the scale is perceiving. In contrast, on the right, if we put a 100-pound weight on and the scale actually is 100 pounds, that scale is considered calibrated. So what can happen with Parkinson's disease, both in terms of voice and movement, is that the person with Parkinson's disease may feel like they're putting out that 100 pounds in their loudness or their movement, but actually what's coming out is much less. And thus the voice is softer and the movements may be smaller and slower. While some people recognize that that's happening, they may not recognize the degree to which their voice has gotten softer or their movements have gotten slower. And so the system, because of Parkinson's disease, the sensory motor system in a sense, is out of calibration. And that's what we need to address and improve to have maximum treatment outcomes. So now I'm going to talk specifically about voice, and then again, I'll turn it over to Heather, who will talk specifically about movement. So with voice, the barriers to calibration, first of all, is a sensory disorder. And so many people with Parkinson's disease, as I just mentioned, actually do have softer speech, but they may not recognize it or realize how soft it's gotten. They may feel like, I feel like I'm speaking like I always have. I don't understand why people don't understand me. I think they should hear me when they don't. So this concept or this idea that, we say with humor, but in the sense that many patients will say, I think my spouse needs a hearing aid. And many patients say that. And the reality is maybe your spouse does, but also likely it's an aspect of your speech getting soft with Parkinson's disease. In terms of internal cueing, we know that for many people with Parkinson's disease, when we ask you to get louder, you can do it, and in some cases quite easily. And so we say the physiological substrate for that movement, that vocal motor output, is present. But for some reason, it's not being activated in daily communication. And so that's a challenge, and that's why that soft voice can persist. And then finally, with Parkinson's disease, just like movements can get slower, sometimes thinking can get a little slower. And these can be subtle changes. A little bit slower thinking, maybe learning takes a little longer than it used to. Maybe it's a little difficult to keep sustained attention or shift cognitive sets. And so with those parameters, we want to have treatment that facilitates learning. And so we incorporate that in our process of calibration as well. So the four actually areas of calibration that are addressed during LSVT loud treatment are education, our daily exercises and hierarchy, our carryover exercises, and our homework exercises. I'm going to walk through each of these, how they're implemented in LSVT Loud. And an underlying point for all of these areas of calibration is that salience, or things that are important to each individual person, is vital to the successful treatment outcomes. So calibration requires individualization. And even though LSVT protocols are standardized programs, they've been validated with research, within that program, we have a great amount of latitude to make it specific and individualized to each person. So for example, with communication, we want to know your long-term goals for improving communication. And as we do our exercises and practice, we want to incorporate things that are meaningful to you, that are successful for you, as we recognize it activates both the basal ganglia circuitry, which is disordered in Parkinson's disease, and can promote brain change, so neuroplasticity or improvements in neural functioning as a result of treatment. So in terms of communication, some long-term goals that individuals may have. You know, I want to maintain my voice because I'm still teaching and lecturing or at other job responsibilities. Being understood when I go to church and socialize, or out at restaurants, being able to order the meal myself. Being able to read to your children or grandchildren. Being understood on the telephone and not having to repeat yourself. Communicating with care partners or caretakers. Conversing with spouse and family again without having to repeat all the time. So those are just some examples, but of course in therapy it would be individualized to your specific goals. So let's talk about education. In terms of education and LSVT Lab, we want to help the person with Parkinson's disease, first of all, recognize their old voice or their voice they walked in the door with is too soft, and that the new, louder voice is normal and has a positive impact on daily functional communication. So we're going to use a hypothetical person with Parkinson's disease as we walk through explaining these aspects of calibration. So this person is a female. She's early stage 2 of Parkinson's disease and really motivated to improve her speech. One of her overall functional goals is that social communication has become not a lot of fun for her anymore. And so she wants to get back to be confident, to participate in conversations. She wants to not feel ignored at dinner parties or social events, to decrease again the amount of time she has to repeat herself. She gets frustrated and then just says, it's not worth it. So enjoy conversations again. In terms of activities she loves, one of the activities that she loves is that she's a movie buff. So we're going to utilize this information in our treatment sessions. So for education, this is embedded throughout the treatment session. I'm going to introduce the loudness diagram, which I'll show you in the next slide. I'm going to, day one, really record you reading a standard passage and save that. Put it aside and pull it back out and play it for you again mid-treatment and at the end of treatment so that you can hear how your voice has changed. I'm going to record your voice and play it back. So oftentimes if you tell me I don't think my voice is too soft, I will have recorded it. I can play it back, and oftentimes that's shocking to some patients, like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize that's actually how I sound. And similarly, when I get you loud and you protest and say, I can't talk like that, I'm talking too loud, I can play back that recording to you, and you can realize, oh my gosh, that it really sounded like it was shouting to me, but I can hear when you're playing that back to me, it sounds actually quite good. I'm going to inquire throughout treatment in week 1, about how you feel ignored. When are you asked to repeat? Are people leaning in? Are there incorrect responses to your questions? And I'm going to reference those throughout the course of treatment as your voice improves to see if we're getting diminishing amounts of times that you have to repeat or getting incorrect responses to your questions. So this is the loudness diagram. And this is something we introduced to individuals with Parkinson's disease early in treatment. And in short, what we tell individuals is that before Parkinson's disease and people without Parkinson's disease, when you go to talk, out comes normal loudness, which is the middle bar here. If you want to talk loud, you put in 1 step of effort. If you want to shout, you can put in 2 steps of effort and you feel and hear that difference. Well, now as a result of Parkinson's disease, your voice has gotten soft. And in some cases, it may have gotten very soft. So if your voice is soft, it takes 1 step of effort just to get to normal loudness, but you may feel like you're talking loud. If your voice is very soft, it may take 2 steps of effort just to get to normal loudness, but for you as the person speaking, you feel like you're shouting. So it's a nice visual that we refer back and forth to constantly throughout our treatment sessions. Okay, in terms of education on week 2, I'm going to check in on any improvements. So how's it going? When you went to dinner last night, were you able to use your loud voice? Did you feel less ignored? I may ask, with your permission, can I call a family member or close friend at the end of week 2 and ask them how they think you're doing, so I can gain some insight to improvements that are happening outside of the treatment room, independent of me, the therapist. I'm going to ask you about any aha moments, and we describe aha moments as times when, even though this voice feels very funny to you, you walk out the door, you use the louder voice, people respond in a very positive way, and it starts to give you confidence that, oh my gosh, I can do this. And when I use this louder voice, even though it feels funny, it has a positive impact. And always we're asking people throughout treatment, what's the most important thing to think about in order to be understood? And we want that answer to always be think loud. All right, moving on to week 3. I'm going to be continuing a lot of those week 1, week 2 activities, continuing to discuss comments from friends and families and coworkers about changes in communication. Probing on, is it getting more comfortable? You know, when you say those functional phrases, are they coming out loud? I'm going to record your voice, play it back, and simply consistently checking in. How does this feel? How does this sound? How is it working for you out in the real world? On week 4, again, continuing those check-ins. Are you repeating less? Could you get through your business meeting yesterday without any need to repeat yourself? How's it going in conversation? I'm going to record that passage that we recorded that very first day in week 1. Now I'm going to record it again at the end of week 4 and allow you and me, the therapist, to hear how much the voice has changed from that very first day till the end of treatment, and remind you, this is impressive. These are dramatic improvements. I'm going to continue to say, what's the most important thing to think about? And I want that answer to be absolutely loud. And I always want to ask by the end of the treatment, who is responsible for you to have a louder voice? And the answer should be, I am, you, the person with Parkinson's disease. So I've, as a clinician, have been a facilitator of loudness throughout these weeks of treatment. But at the end of 16 sessions, you know what to do, you have the skills, you have the confidence, and you are the boss of your own voice and communication. Okay, our second area of calibration then are daily exercises and our hierarchy exercises. These provide opportunities to practice using that louder voice during salient, important activities and individual treatment goals. So across the weeks of treatment, we have a combination of structured reading tasks and spontaneous speech activities. And this gets into the hierarchy exercises of treatment, and even some of the daily exercises. So as treatment progresses, we're going to increase length of utterance of practice as well as complexity of speech, and we're going to tie that back to your long-term communication goal and your hobbies and activities of what you like to talk about. So during the daily exercises, for example, some of those long ahs or highs and lows, I'm going to reinforce that's the amount of effort and loudness you need to feel in every social situation so that you know people can hear and understand you. I may have you for reading tasks, read list of movies because I know that's a passion for my patient. Then I may spontaneously ask them questions about the list or ask them to name their favorite movies. Excuse me. In week 2, now I'm going to check in on that effort level. Are you using your 9 voice from your ahs when you are talking with your friends? So making that connection between what we're doing in therapy and what happens in the real world. Now I'm going to have you reading longer length of utterance. So maybe I'm going to have you reading famous quotes from movies. I'm going to ask you longer questions about your favorite movies. During week 3, now during your daily exercises, again, your long ahs, high lows, functional phrases, I'm going to challenge you. And I'm going to add in dual cognitive or motor tasks. Maybe I ask you movie trivia questions at the beginning, the ah, and you've got to give me the answer at the end of the ah. I'm going to have longer reading passages for you. So current movie reviews, movie magazines, movie histories. Now you have to keep that loudness for longer and longer periods of time. And then I'm going to throw in more open-ended, spontaneous questions. And by week 4, it's a lot about dual motor and cognitive tasks, again, while you're doing your daily exercises. And for speech practice, it's conversational speech. We may discuss movies of client's choice, of your patient's choice. I'm going to ask you open-ended questions. We may get outside of the treatment room. We may go for a walk or grab a coffee while we're doing this talking. So basically across those 4 weeks with the exercises and the hierarchy, I'm tying them to how you communicate out in the real world. We're increasing the amount of time you need to keep your voice loud and the complexity of the communication situation. So let's take a look at a video. This is me in a treatment session with a woman, and it just kind of shows how I'm cueing her into how it feels in the treatment session and how she needs to use that same loudness out in the real world.
Let's do it again. Same thing. Good morning. How did you sleep? Do you want some cereal?
What do you think?
Okay, I can understand it. It's a little soft still.
Okay, so did you feel like it was going to be louder than it sounded?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. But it sounds really good. It's better than it was.
Oh,
that
good.
voice is sounding good, and that's the voice we're targeting. That's the voice we're after.
Yeah, I can even feel it sort of rumbling down here. Yeah, when I speak. So
Good.
yeah, it's very different.
So think about how that feels so that when you walk out, you know, okay, if I don't feel that rumbling, if I don't feel that effort, I'm not loud enough. And that's
Okay.
what's got to haunt you. If I don't feel like I feel when I'm talking with Cynthia, I'm not talking loud enough. I need to step up the effort. Okay, so you could hear how I was making that connection between what we're doing in the treatment room and how it feels and how that's the voice you need to use out in the real world. And that's the essence of calibration across both LSVT Loud and LSVT Big. All right, so the next area now are carryover assignments. These assignments are given on all 30 days of the month of the LSVT program as part of your homework activity. And we define them as daily assignments to use your loud voice in real-life situations outside of the treatment room. The difficulty of the assignment progresses across the 4 weeks of treatment, and the carryover exercises are very specific, and you are made accountable for doing them. So your therapist will want to make sure that these are happening. These are just examples of types of carryover exercises that might be given for our client that we have as she goes through LSVT Loud. So for example, on week 1, it might be when you leave the clinic, tell your spouse, let's go with your loud voice. So it's a short, simple phrase level assignment. Week 2, when you call your friend tonight, use your loud voice to ask her, what can I bring to the potluck? Do you need any help setting up? And when you come back to treatment the next day, I'm going to ask, so did your friend notice your voice? Did you have to ask to repeat? How did it feel? How did it sound? Week 3, the assignments are getting a little longer. So tonight, tell your husband the 4 reasons why you think you should go to Italy this summer. Remember to use your loud voice. And of course, in treatment, I'm going to find out, did you convince your husband? But actually, to be sure you were confident using that loudness. And in week 4, at your support group meeting today, use your loud voice to tell the group about specific progress you have made for the upcoming fundraiser. So these are very specific tasks, and we get very specific feedback. They're non-negotiable. They have to be done all 30 days of the month, and the complexity of them increases as treatment progresses. Okay, the last area of calibration for LSVT loud is homework. Homework assignments, again, are given all 30 days of the month. They're 10 minutes of practice, one other time a day during treatment, so maybe Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday when you see your therapist, and then 15 minutes twice a day on non-treatment days, and that might be Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So homework is designed to provide additional practice, get you comfortable with that voice, but most importantly, establish a routine. This is something you're going to need to keep doing for the rest of your life. As long as Parkinson is with you, your voice exercises need to be with you. So we like to say, you brush your teeth, you do your ahs. It becomes that much a part of your daily living. So for example, on week 1, maybe I'm going to leave a voicemail to have you leave me a voicemail to be sure that you're doing your homework with healthy voice. I'm going to establish your schedule. I'm going to monitor that all homework is completed each day. Week 2, again, you're going to have your daily assignments. I'm going to discuss where and when you're practicing to make sure you have a good routine. You've gotten over feeling self-conscious about your neighbors hearing you. Suggest as needed, do you need somebody to remind you to do your homework? Do you need to use a tool like the Homework Helper DVD? Week 3, again, I'm going to touch base. As you do your homework, are you using your 9 loud voice like we do every day in treatment? And week 4, as we're drawing to a close, I'm going to continue to discuss the importance of practice to maintain this loud voice, ensure it's in place, provide those homework recommendations at the end of treatment, and be sure that you are confident you can keep practicing after the 16 sessions are over. So our calibration goal at the end of treatment for our patient that we've walked through as an example is that she's using habitually a louder voice in daily functional communication. Her homework routine is well established for independent practice. I'll give her discharge recommendations for continued daily practice, and I'm going to want to check in at 6 months to see how she's doing. And if needed, perhaps we need some tune-up session, some revision on our homework goals, but the idea is that at the end of treatment, she's really worked herself out of the need for me, the speech therapist, and is able to do this on her own. All right, so now it's time to move on and hear about how calibration is implemented in LSVT Big, and for that, I will turn it over to Heather.
Thank you so much, Cynthia. So it is my part of the presentation now to talk about LSVT Big and how we use the big amplitude movements throughout every functional task that we do each day. So let's take a look at the next slide. And much like Dr. Fox was talking about the barriers to calibration with regard to the voice, I'm going to touch upon the barriers to calibration with regard to your movement. So again, the first level is sensory. And we know that people with Parkinson's disease have difficulty realizing or perceiving that their movements are too small. Perhaps you didn't know that your arm wasn't swinging until someone pointed that out to you. Perhaps it's been taking you much longer to walk a typical route that you walk all of the time, and this is because, again, your steps have become too smaller. And when we, as physical or occupational therapists, get you to move into the normal range of motion and to take those bigger movements, you sometimes feel that those movements are far too big, and you feel like we're asking you to do something that is really uncomfortable initially. But we know that we need to push that effort and that amplitude to really get those movements back to what we call normal, natural limits. The other difficult is the internal cueing, and that is that along with not being able to perceive that the movements are too small, individuals with Parkinson's disease don't cue themselves to use those bigger movements. So when you weren't feeling that that arm wasn't swinging as much as it should, you weren't therefore telling yourself, I need to swing that arm. And again, if you weren't noticing that your steps were becoming smaller, you weren't then saying to yourself, I need to take bigger steps. And one of the difficulties that we face a lot with physical and occupational therapy with internal cueing is if people do realize that it's actually taking them longer to walk, sometimes they'll think about actually speeding up. Well, I need to walk faster. And that's actually the wrong cue to use. The cue is going to be that we make bigger movements. And the last of those barriers to calibration are also the neuropsychological deficits, much like Dr. Fox had mentioned earlier. We know that individuals with Parkinson's have difficulty keeping focused on one task at a time. We know that trying to shift attention from one thing to another, so possibly the ability to be able to walk down the hallway and turn your head to be able to look to someone who's talking to you, or the ability to be able to step off a curb but also look around the corner to make sure that a car is not coming. We know that the ability to move from one task to another can be very difficult. And we know that there are situations with anxiety and depression that are part of Parkinson's disease, as well as having a heightened fear of falling. So when you are feeling that you are not balanced, or you've already begun to experience any kind of balance instability or have actually had a fall, this can really lead to more fear of falling, which then can lead to a decrease in activity. And that's a cycle that we as therapists who work with LSVT Big really want to break. Let's look at the next slide. This is a video of a gentleman who I have asked to simply take a walk down the hall in the clinic, and then I'm assessing what I'm looking at with his walking. What you're going to notice is how narrow his steps are and how small they are, how he's really not swinging the arm, and how he's looking down. Then you're going to see him after I have cued him to go crazy big, and I'm asking him to take really big steps, and you're going to see how he is thinking that he's going crazy big, but his movements actually look much more normal. So let's take a look at that video.
Yeah, now it can be standing on the right.
Good, and coming back.
I want you to go crazy big, really big. Just stretch those arms, stretch those legs super big. Go for it. Do you think you can go even bigger on the way back? Come on, much bigger. Go for it. Much bigger. Come on, keep it up. Nice and big.
And I know it might have been a little challenging on your end to kind of see the difference there, but he was a very tall gentleman, and his wife was much shorter than he was, and she had spent all of their married life trying to keep up with him. And when he started to really lag behind her was when she really knew that something was wrong. So with cueing him to go crazy big, he actually was taking more of a normal step, like the step that he would have taken prior to having Parkinson's. So this slide here just gives you a brief snapshot of what a full LSVT Big treatment session looks like, and what we're talking about when we're talking about how we're getting you calibrated to think about moving bigger and to make those bigger movements. So we have on the left side of your screen our 7 maximal daily exercises, and what's important to note about the exercises is that we are going to link these exercises to a functional movement that you do. So if you look at number 3, the forward step, when we do that big forward step, I will often say to my clients, now, remember, that's the kind of step that I need you to take when you are in a freeze and you need to get to a doorway. Or that's the kind of step that I need you to take when you get that first step after you get up in the morning and you're feeling kind of tired and you're feeling like your steps might be kind of shuffling. I want you to remember when we did this forward step exercise, the big step that you took and the big effort that you gave me, that's the kind of effort and step I want you to give with your walking. And if you look down at exercise number 6, called our forward rock and reach, and that's an exercise where we have individuals shifting their weight back and forth, and then we have them swinging their arms. And to be able to reach your arms way up high over your head, I'll often say to my clients again, remember when you were doing your rock and reach exercise, this is how we reached we're going to reach high up onto that cabinet so that you can pull down that cereal box. Or this is how we're going to reach up way high to kind of push your arm into your coat. Or this is how we're going to reach up high to perhaps pull the pillow down under our head to get more comfortable in the bed. And then we move on to our functional component tasks. These are much like Dr. Fox was talking about the functional phrases. These are simple one-step tasks that we do. One of them is always sit to stand. And you can see things like the ability to pull your keys out of your pocket. We're also working on big walking, and that would mean walking inside, outside, up and down steps, on curbs, on ramps. Wherever it is that you are tasked with walking, we will practice with you. And that is as well with an assisted device. Maybe you're using a cane or a rollator or not. And then our hierarchy tasks, and those are those big complex tasks that you want to do. So being able to get in and out of bed and get to the bathroom in a timely manner. Being able to walk into your office and get into your desk, perhaps getting in and out of a car. And again, much like Dr. Fox was talking about how we start out on a simple side and then we increase the complexity over the 4 weeks with the LSVT Loud, we're going to do that same thing with LSVT Big. And as we go through the next series of slides, we'll talk about how we do that. So again, those 4 areas of calibration that we're going to address now, first is education. We're then going to talk a little bit more about the daily exercises, those functional component tasks that I mentioned, and the hierarchy tasks. And then again, like LSVT Loud, we're also going to talk about carryover exercises and the homework exercises. And again, it's very, very important for you to know that we want all of these items that you are doing, all of the exercises, all of the functional movements to be salient or important to you, so that it's something that you care about and it's something that is applicable to your life and to whatever you are doing that's going to give you quality of life. So let's break these down and look at each of them. Next slide. Again, with education, we are going to work with you, the person with Parkinson's, to help first to recognize that the movements that you have now with Parkinson's disease are are too small and therefore too slow. So when we make small movements, it takes us longer to perform them. And then we're going to help you to understand and recognize that the new big movements that you're going to be doing with us in the clinic as well as outside of the clinic at home are the movements that you need to do that will actually have that positive impact on your daily function. Next slide. And again, how we are educating you with the daily exercises is much like I said before. We are going to help you to learn and acknowledge that those exercises really are your links to function. You're going to do those exercises with such effort and such determination and with so much repetition that they really become an integral part of how it helps you to remember this is what I need to do when I need to move better, when I need to move bigger, and when I need to move safer. Next slide. So we're looking at real life. We're not looking at just things within the clinic. We're talking about who you are as a person and what are those tasks that you want to perform that really are going to make an impact on your life. Are you someone who really enjoys being in the kitchen and preparing meals for your family? Are you someone who has a green thumb and you enjoy getting out in the garden, planting vegetables, planting all sorts of plants? Are you somebody who really likes to get out in nature and go hiking? Are we talking about your activities of daily living? Are you having difficulty now being able to do your hair, put on your makeup the way you once enjoyed? And perhaps it's something that you want to do with just shopping for enjoyment. Maybe you're someone who really likes to get out there and you enjoy looking for a new purse or shoes. Or maybe it's the fact that you don't want your daughter or your son to have to do your food shopping for you anymore, and you want to be the person who's out there making those decisions about what you are buying. So we want to look about how are you participating in your life? What are those activities? And then we're going to educate you how to improve those movements throughout each. Next slide. So we're talking about using tasks that you will walk out the door with. So again, it's not just what you are going to do with us, so under the tutelage of your physical or occupational therapist, but it's how we educate you to walk out of the door, to go home, and to use these new big movements in everyday life. Next slide. So when we look at our functional tasks and our hierarchy tasks, these truly are further opportunities for you to practice using those bigger movements during those important activities that you want to do and the goals that we have worked together. So if you are wanting to get out back into the garden, those are the things we're going to practice with you. So let's talk about how we go through that. Next slide. So if we move ahead to a hierarchy task, so perhaps you're having difficulty being able to get out of bed and get to the bathroom in the middle of the night, and right now you have to ask your bed partner to help you, and perhaps they're not getting enough sleep and they're not getting rested, and this is something that you feel that you want to be able to do for them. You want to be able to get out of bed on your own. So we first need to think about, well, what are those subtasks of being able to get out of bed? One of the first things is we have to be able to take off those bed covers, so get out from under the sheets and the blankets. And now out here, at least in the Philadelphia region, it's starting to get cool and people are getting more bedclothes on and heavier blankets. Once we've gotten all of that off the top of us, then we have to roll onto our side. And then as you can see in the picture here, that effort or that movement to really go from pushing up from your side to a seated position, then being able to feel good posture, stabilization, and then that last step in being able to move from that sitting position on the edge of the bed to be able to standing. So through those hierarchy subtasks, we're practicing those with you throughout the weeks, where we start maybe a more simple movement and then we improve it and in complexity take it through that. And we're going to talk about that in the next slides. So here we have that hierarchy example. So in week 1, we're breaking down those subtasks and we're practicing just bits of them. We're not doing the entire movement together. So perhaps we're talking about grabbing that sheet or that blanket and lifting it up with a big pull of the hand. Then perhaps we're practicing bending the knees up. If we want to get a really good ability to roll over on our sides, we have to bend those knees up big. And then we actually move into that big rolling. And we practice these in little blocks. There's a lot of encouragement from your therapist, and we might be actually putting on our hands, touching you, and helping you to make these motions. By the time we get into week 2, now we're starting to put these movements together. So now we're moving from the big rolling into that big push from on your side up to sit, and then scooting to the edge of the bed so you can get your feet flat onto the floor. And this is where we start to pull back a little and let you start doing more of that, where you're cueing yourself to make those bigger movements. By the time we're getting to week 3, now we're having you practice the entire scenario and remembering to use big effort and big amplitude, those big movements throughout everything. So it's that big lifting of the sheet, it's a big bending up of both of those knees, it's a big roll over to your side, we're pushing up with big effort to sit, we make a big scoot forward, and then we practice that big sit to stand. And behind all of those movements, again, not just with the bigness of the size of the movement, but using big effort. And by the time we're getting to that last week of treatment, you're performing all of those tasks again, but now we as the therapist are making it significantly more challenging for you. So now maybe instead of just practicing with a sheet and a light blanket, now we're giving you a much heavier blanket. Perhaps we're putting you into a darkened room, much like it would be at home. We're no longer using the shoes on the mat table. Now I'm having you reach over and shut off the alarm. I'm having you reach over and turn on the light. And while we're doing all that, I might be asking you questions to answer. So not only do you have to do that task of getting out of the bed, but I'm giving you a dual task where perhaps I'm talking to you about what are the gifts that you're going to be purchasing for your husband's birthday. So we take it from simple, smaller tasks, and then we build it up in complexity and difficulty over those 4 weeks. Next slide. And again, much like LSVT Loud, we give you those same carryover assignments. And again, they are given to you on all 30 days of the LSVT Big program as an additional part of homework, as an additional opportunity for you to practice those movements. And those carryover exercises are really little assignments that we give you. In the beginning, they start out more simple, and then we take them up in difficulty, but they're daily assignments so that you can use your big movements in real-life situations outside of the clinic. So when I'm not there cueing you and watching you. And again, we take the difficulty of the assignment and we progress it across those 4 weeks, much like we did with the example of the hierarchy tasks. And again, those carryover exercises are specific to you, so we would say to you at the end of the session, okay, Mrs. Miller, what are you doing today when you leave? And then Mrs. Miller might say to me, well, I'm leaving this afternoon and I have to pick my granddaughter up at school because my daughter is working late. So then perhaps I'm going to make that carryover exercise assignment based on that thing that she's already doing. I'm going to say to her, okay, well, when you go and you walk up to that school, I want you to make sure that you take that big step up the curb, and when you reach for that door to open it up to the outside of the school, you're reaching with a big hand and you're opening it up. And I'm going to make you accountable for what you're doing. So it's an additional way for you to go out into the real world, practice what we're learning in the clinic, and then come back and tell me about how you felt about your movements and how it impacted your quality of life. Let's look at the next slide and we'll talk a little bit more about this with some examples. So on week 1, again, keeping it more simplistic. When you leave the clinic, I want you to reach to open the door with big effort and a big open hand. So a much more simple task with just working on opening the door and keeping the hand open. Getting to week 2, now when you get home, I want you to walk big across the room to your spouse and I want you to give her a big hug. So now I'm adding in a couple of movements with the walking and the reaching and then the squeezing of the hug. By the time we're getting to week 3, now we're adding in many more. So when you're shopping with your wife today, I want you to step big up to that shelf in the supermarket. So step toward that shelf big. I want you to reach up big and get those higher items that she can't reach. So now we have multiple layers of big movements. As opposed to by the time we're getting to week 4, if my client is saying to me, well, today, after I'm done, I'm going to my grandson's basketball game. And that's a great opportunity for me to say, tonight, when you are at your grandson's basketball game, I want you to walk in big to the gym. I want you to take big steps up the bleacher to get to your seat, and then stand and cheer in a big way when he makes a basket. And remember, when you're standing, I want you to stand with your big posture. So you can see how that complexity over the weeks that you're with us is going to increase, and again, it's going to take you into the real world out of the clinic so that you can assess your own movement quality and how it's affecting your quality of life. Next slide. And then lastly, we have our homework assignments as well. And again, those assignments are going to be given to you on all 30 days of the program. When you meet with your therapist, you're still going to have another time during that day to do those exercises. So those 4 days a week, you're doing them with us in the clinic and then another time at home. And then on the 3 days a week that you're not with us, you're going to do those exercises in that program 2 times a day. Next slide. And again, remember, the homework is not a punishment. It is a good thing. It is designed to help you to have additional time for practice. It's designed to make you feel really comfortable with the use of that big movement effort. Whereas in the beginning with my client, I had to say crazy big, and by the end, he knew that that amount of bigness and effort he needed actually produced him with good quality movement. And then it really helps to set forth a routine. It's going to help you to establish that routine now and forever, because the exercises and those movements that we give you are going to stay with you throughout the rest of your life. And we say, just like you would take your medication, you're going to take your big movements. You wouldn't stop taking your medication, and we don't expect as your therapist for you to stop making your big movements. Next slide. So what we're looking for ultimately with getting you calibrated and having you have that achievement of calibration is that you'll be more confident. And with more confidence, you're going to say to yourself, you know what, I can move better, I can move faster, and I'm much more safer. You know what, I feel better and more confident about myself, and I can do more things than I used to do, things I might have been afraid to do before, and things that I was less likely to do. And the more confident you are, the more active you're going to be. And we know that individuals who stay physically and socially and vocally active with Parkinson's do much better in the long run. And again, increasing your activity levels are going to help to possibly slow the motor progression of the disease and help to keep you less likely to have a fall. So once we achieve calibration with you and you are moving and reaching and stepping and doing all of the things you want to do in a much safer way, your confidence improves and the quality of your life improves. Next slide. So remember, we want you to be calibrated all of the time because you have learned successfully what to do. You are with us in the clinic, walking big, thinking big, talking loud, thinking loud, and when you walk through the door and you leave us to go home, we have now retrained your sensory cueing process, and you're learning how to cue yourselves for normal movement, effort, and bigness, and normal vocal loudness. So you are just as good in the clinic as you are outside of the clinic, and without us, you're able to continue being calibrated. Next slide. So in summary, remember that both LSVT loud and LSVT big are more than just simple exercises, that we are translating improved voice and movement into daily function is really our goal with therapy. And that why do we use calibration? Well, we're using calibration to overcome that sensory internal cueing and neuropsychological changes that make the translation of the louder voice and bigger movements into daily function a challenge. So using calibration helps to override those difficulties. Remember that within your treatments, we're using many different ways to help you. We're using education, we're using the treatment exercises and the hierarchies, as well as the carryover assignments and your homework exercises. And that the skill and knowledge of someone who does LSVT loud or LSVT big by becoming a certified clinician is really essential in the successful treatment outcome. So having someone who has been certified in these two techniques and who specializes in knowing the amount of effort and the amount of work and calibration that you need to do is ultimately going to translate into you having more success outside of the clinic. Next slide. So we want to share with you that we do offer further learning opportunities. Remember that we have plenty of webinars. They are on demand. So if you know someone who was not able to attend this webinar today, they can always log on to lsvtglobal.com and they can watch this at their leisure. And again, they can always attend a number of different live options. There is both the LSVT Loud Homework Helper video and the LSVT Big Homework Helper video. And you can have these both on a DVD version or they're downloadable via Vimeo, which is a streaming service on your computer. And this is a nice way of feeling that you have a little extra help at home when your therapist isn't there to help to continue to do both your LSVT Loud and LSVT Big program. Again, there's also the LSVT companion system that you can speak to your speech-language pathologist more about. And we always have someone who is available via our phone number there that we have on the screen or via our email called Ask the Expert. And you can certainly ask any questions that you want and we'll have an expert of the month review that question and get back to you. And a really new exciting thing that we have now going on is both the Loud for Life and Big for Life post-LSVT group exercises. So when you've completed either your LSVT Loud or your LSVT Big, we are working now to train clinicians in your area in putting together group exercise classes so that you have further opportunities to work with other individuals and to stay motivated to stay active and healthy. Next slide. So we'd like to thank you so much for your time now, and I'm going to turn the presentation back over to Dr. Fox, and she's going to talk to you about how you can ask some questions and help us with the survey.
Thank you, Heather. So at any time in your question box in your control panel, you can type in a question. There's also a little icon in your control panel that if you have a microphone that you're using or with your computer, you can click the little raise your hand. I can unmute your microphone and you can ask your question. If you think of questions later, at any time, again, you can email info@lsvtglobal.com. Send those to us and we will email back a response to you. We will open the question phase now, and just a quick reminder that as you close out of the webinar, please take a few moments and complete that survey. So Heather, I've got a question for you to begin, and it says, how can I motivate my spouse to do the LSVT homework?
Thank you for that question. We are asked this quite often because, as you know, we spoke about how depression and anxiety and apathy and kind of low vigor and motivation can be really problematic in people with Parkinson's. One of the ways that I help to get my patients motivated is to really find out what do they do that makes them happy and what brings them joy. So what are some of the things that really help you to feel like who you are? What are you doing? Do you want to get out and go to museums? Do you want to spend more time with your family? Are there hobbies that you wanted to get into? Are there things that you feel as though Parkinson's has robbed you of? Are there things that you've stopped doing? So I want to know what those activities are that help you to see yourself as an active participant in your community, in your family, and in your life. So we will tailor the program to help people to be able to regain what they want to do. So I always say, you know, I don't really want to learn how to knit, so if someone tries to make me knit, I'm probably not going to be motivated to do it. But if someone wanted to teach me how to make a beautiful souffle, I'd be very motivated to do that. So again, your therapist really needs to work with your spouse to really find out again who they are, what makes them who they are, and what kind of things they want to do. And by doing that, that should hopefully help with motivation.
Thank you. Next question that's come in, and I'll answer it from LSVT Loud, and then I'll let you, Heather, take it from the LSVT Big perspective. But is this beneficial for MSA patients, so multi-system atrophy? Absolutely, it can be beneficial for multi-system atrophy, progressive supranuclear palsy, some of these Parkinson plus syndromes. Now, in terms of our research, we do not have the same level of study in these subpopulations of Parkinson's. But from our clinical perspectives, and there are some case studies that have been published, it can absolutely provide benefit. A few things to keep in mind. First of all, we would love to get the referral upon diagnosis so that as soon as possible, we're working with individuals, we're reestablishing communication patterns, they're learning the exercises so that hopefully they can maintain improved communication for a longer period of time and know what to do as the MSA progresses. Sometimes we may not get the referral till the MSA has progressed quite a bit. It still doesn't mean that we can't be helpful. Sometimes our goals then with speech are to be sure that the person, for example, has those 10 functional phrases. They can say oral communication a non-familiar listener can understand. Then we may need to train care partners, people around them, to externally cue, to remind the person, use your loud voice so that they can assist in that carryover and maintenance of the loud voice over time. And the third and final point I'll make on this is that frequently these individuals need more treatment either in the initial delivery, so might need more than 16 sessions to get to the point that somebody with an idiopathic Parkinson person would get to in those 16 sessions, and absolutely probably more frequent follow-up. I wouldn't wait 6 months before I saw you again. Perhaps we get on a, once a week or every 2 week tune-up treatment session schedule. I would want to get you involved in the post groups or using the videos so that we really help you maintain improvements. And Heather, I don't know if you want to make some comments about LSVT Big and MSA.
Sure. So absolutely, just like Dr. Fox said, the sooner in the course of the disease process, the better. But again, we can work with people in any stage. Remember that MSA does come in 3 kind of subcategories, and one of those subcategories is the autonomic nervous system dysfunction, where people are having a lot of problem with orthostatic hypotension, where they feel like they're going to pass out when they do positional changes. So it may be that we need to take additional care with that individual where we can actually adapt the exercises so that someone is holding on to something for safety, or perhaps even performing all of the exercises in a seated position. Because there is no known medication or neurological surgery for MSA, the best option that we have in the course of the treatment is truly through the therapy. So using both LSVT big and LSVT loud would be appropriate.
Thank you. One last question, because I know we're out of time, but this is a pretty quick one. Someone is asking, how do I get the homework helper videos? So there are multiple ways to get the videos, and my first disclaimer is the videos are tools. They can be used before, during, after treatment, but they do not replace the need for that individual skilled care with an LSVT certified clinician. So we always just like to clarify that. But the videos can either be ordered through our website at lsvtglobal.com. You can, if you're not comfortable using the website, you can also call our toll-free number, which is 888-438-5788. And again, the email address that's on your screen as well, all of those would work. That is the actual DVD. You can also order it on Amazon. I will tell you that sometimes shipping fees are quite a bit cheaper through Amazon. So if you go to Amazon and in the search tool, either put LSVT loud or LSVT big, it pretty quickly takes you to the page with the videos. The third way and most recent way is through Vimeo, and that's Vimeo, Vimeo.com. And this option allows you to either purchase a download. So for example, if you want to use it on your iPad, you can purchase the download and own it. Perhaps you're not sure if you want to use it. There's a cheaper option where you can rent the videos for a year. Of course, with the rental, you need to have that internet connection at the time. So with Vimeo, just like Amazon, if you get to the home site, type in on the search bar LSVT loud or LSVT big, it should take you to those options. So with that, I believe we have come to the end of our time together. We really appreciate all of you joining us today. We hope this information has been helpful. You have a better understanding of what LSVT loud and LSVT entail, and that you're inspired to get out there, keep communicating, keep moving, and living the best life you can with Parkinson's disease. So thank you, and we'll say goodbye.